My daughter cut me off for 12 long years. Then one morning, she showed up at my door, with her husband, their designer luggage, and a smirk that could curdle blood. She said, "Dad, since you're a millionaire now, we're moving in." I smiled out of joy, but out of something colder. Because she had no idea what I'd learned in those 12 years, and what I had planned for her next. Before I tell you what happened next, I just want to thank you for being here. If you're listening right now, take a moment to subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Every story I share carries a piece of my life, some painful, some healing, but all of them are lessons worth passing on. Your support reminds me that no matter how old we get, we're never too old to keep learning, and never too old to share the truth. My name's Samuel Whitaker, though most folks around town still call me Mr. Whitaker. The shop teacher who could fix anything except, it seems, his own family. I'm 72 now. My knees creak louder than the floorboards, my hands are slower than they used to be, and I've learned that silence has a sound all its own. Mine hums through the mornings, somewhere between the kettle's whistle and the slow tick of the old clock above my kitchen door. Every day starts the same way. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. I sit by the window and watch the light crawl up over the lake, touching the old oak tree I planted the day my daughter Lauren was born. Back then, life was simple. I worked 6 days a week at Oak Ridge High, teaching kids how to turn rough wood into something beautiful. Lauren used to sit on my workbench with sawdust in her hair, swinging her legs and asking 100 questions I never minded answering. I used to joke that she'd inherit the world one day. I just didn't know she'd try to take mine. After her mother passed, it was just the two of us. I did everything I could to keep her world steady. College tuition, her first car, even half her wedding expenses, all from years of patching roofs, saving every dime, and saying no to myself so I could say yes to her. When she married Ethan, I gave them my blessing and half my savings, telling them, "You can always make more money, but you can't make more time." Funny thing is, time became the thing they stole most. At first, the calls just got shorter. Then the holidays got quieter. Until one Christmas, I sat at my table with 2 plates, one untouched. The next year, no invitation came at all. Eventually, 12 years passed like a long stretch of empty road. No calls, no cards, no visits. People ask if I was angry. I wasn't, not at first. I was hurt in the quiet way that seeps into your bones. That kind of hurt doesn't burn, it lingers. I told myself she was busy, that she'd call when life settled down. But life has a cruel way of settling without you. When I retired, I sold my old tools one by one. Some of my former students, now grown, helped me clear out the shop. One of them, Terry, handed me an envelope on my last day. "You should try your luck once in a while, Mr. W," he said. Inside was a lottery ticket. I laughed, tucked it into my Bible, and forgot about it. Months later, when I found it again and saw the numbers, I nearly spilled my coffee. It wasn't the grand prize, but it was enough to change a man's life. $3.6 million after taxes. Enough to fix my roof, travel a little, and finally live without worrying which bill to pay first. I didn't tell anyone. Old habits die hard. Money doesn't make you young again. It just makes growing old quieter. I bought a small house near Lakewood, filled it with peace and purpose. Mornings were for gardening, afternoons for reading, and evenings for cooking. I wasn't lonely. I was content. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone. But peace has a strange way of warning you before it disappears. It was a Thursday morning, still, bright, perfect. The kettle had just started to sing when I heard tires crunching on the gravel drive. Through the window, I saw a black SUV gleaming in the sunlight, 2 figures inside. When the doors opened, my breath caught. It was Lauren, my daughter. After 12 silent years, she stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan followed behind, dragging 2 expensive suitcases up my porch. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe she'd come home because she missed me. But as she walked closer, I could see it, the confidence of someone coming to claim, not to reconcile. She hadn't come for me. She'd come for what she thought was hers. I stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the peace I'd built, brick by brick, begin to crack beneath her heels. But that peace was about to end. Lauren stood on my doorstep like she owned the place. Her hair was perfect, her perfume too strong, her smile rehearsed. Behind her stood Ethan, holding two matching leather suitcases, the kind of luggage people buy to look successful, not because they travel. "Dad," she said softly, that sugary tone she used to get what she wanted as a child. "It's been so long." 12 years, I said flatly. Long enough for a person to forget what their father looks like. Her eyes darted away. "You've done well for yourself. This place is beautiful, cozy." She looked past me, already scanning the living room like an appraiser. "Must feel strange being here all alone." "I've learned to like the quiet," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." They walked in with the confidence of people who assumed they were already welcome. Ethan's polished shoes clicked on the wooden floor, his eyes flicking to the family photographs on the mantel. I could tell he was doing math, adding, subtracting, estimating what could be liquidated. He finally spoke, his voice smooth but hollow. "We heard about your good fortune, Sam. Lauren's been worried about you. Handling all that money alone isn't safe. People might take advantage." I almost laughed. "People like who?" Lauren's voice rose an octave. "Dad, that's not what he means. We just thought, it's not healthy for you to live out here all by yourself. You need family around. People who care." "Family," I repeated quietly. "You mean the same family that didn't call once in 12 years? The silence that followed could have split the room in two. She shifted uncomfortably. Ethan cleared his throat, stepping into the role of savior. "We've been through a lot these past few years. The market's been rough. My firm hit a few bumps. We thought maybe it'd be good for all of us if we stayed here a while. Just until things even out." Ah, there it was, the ask. I nodded slowly, then gestured toward the living room sofa. "Let's talk about this family reunion of yours." They sat, trying to keep their posture polite while their eyes roamed the room. Lauren's hand rested lightly on Ethan's knee, a subtle signal that she was still in control. I sat across from them, my coffee cooling on the table between us. "So," I began, "tell me what you think you're entitled to." Lauren flinched, as if I'd slapped her. Ethan blinked, then gave a weak laugh. "Entitled? Sam? No one's entitled to anything. This is just about helping each other." "Helping?" I leaned forward slightly. "That's funny, because the last time we spoke, my so-called help was an embarrassment to you." Lauren's face paled. "Dad, that was years ago. I was upset." I cut her off. "You were 31 years old, Lauren, old enough to know that words leave scars." Ethan shifted in his seat. "We were both under pressure. It was a mistake." "Mistake," I repeated slowly. "Do you know what a mistake is? A mistake is leaving the oven on. What you did was a decision." She tried to smile through the sting. "We just thought, after all that time, maybe we could start over, build something again. As a family." "Build," I said, chuckling under my breath. "You can't rebuild something you deliberately burned to the ground." The words hit her like cold water. For a moment the mask slipped, and I saw the panic underneath. Ethan looked away, pretending to admire the furniture. "You've had some financial trouble, haven't you?" I asked. Ethan froze. Lauren tensed. "How did you—" "I still live in the same town you grew up in," I said calmly. "People talk, especially when they see fancy cars getting repossessed and credit collectors knocking on doors." Neither of them spoke. I could feel their embarrassment turning to anger. Good. Truth stings, but it cleans. Finally, Lauren stood. "We just wanted to reconnect, Dad. You don't have to throw it in our faces." I stayed seated, my voice steady. "You didn't come to reconnect. You came because you heard a number, and that number had commas in it." Her face twisted. "You're wrong." "Am I?" I asked softly. "Then tell me, why did you show up with suitcases?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even Ethan, who always had something slick to say, stared at the floor. I stood slowly, letting the chair creak. "You two think you've come here to rescue me, but you're wrong. I'm not the one who needs saving." Lauren's lower lip trembled. "Dad, please, we can make this right." "Maybe," I said. "But that depends on what kind of people you really are." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I looked between them, my daughter and her husband, two strangers in expensive clothes, and for the first time in years I felt completely calm. It means this isn't over yet. You came here thinking you'd take control of my life, but by the time this is done, you'll understand what real accountability feels like. I turned toward the window, letting the sunlight catch the steam rising from my coffee. My reflection stared back, older, wiser, unbreakable, and in that moment I made myself a promise. They thought I'd let it go. They thought I'd stay quiet. But they were wrong. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. That night after they left, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt hollow. The kind of silence that hums inside your chest and won't go away. Their voices still echoed faintly in the corners of the room, like cigarette smoke that lingers long after the flame has died. I sat in my old armchair, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. The clock ticked slow and heavy, each sound a reminder of the years that had slipped away, years of waiting for a phone call that never came, for a daughter who'd chosen distance over love. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good kind I save for bad nights, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and clean. Across the yard, the lake caught the moonlight and shimmered like polished steel. I used to sit out there when Lauren was little. She'd fall asleep in my lap while we watched the fireflies dance, her tiny fingers curled around my thumb. I used to whisper promises into her hair, that I'd always protect her, that she'd never be alone. I kept those promises. She didn't. The first few years after she cut me off were the hardest. I'd call and get her voicemail. Sometimes I'd leave a message, but after a while, even that felt foolish. I sent cards that came back unopened, letters that never got replies. I remember one Thanksgiving. I drove 2 hours to her city with a box of homemade pecan pie. But when I reached her building, she'd already moved. No note, no forwarding address. I sat in my truck for a long time, the pie cooling on the passenger seat, until I realized I didn't even know where my daughter lived anymore. When folks at church asked how she was doing, I'd smile and say, "Busy, you know how kids are." But the truth was uglier. The truth was, I wasn't part of her life at all. Over time, loneliness became its own kind of company. You stop setting out 2 plates for dinner. You stop checking your phone before bed. Eventually, you stop hoping. And when hope finally goes quiet, you find peace in the routine. But peace can be fragile. And when she walked back into my life that morning, she didn't knock it down gently. She shattered it like glass. I sat there on the porch, watching my breath drift in the air. They thought they could use me again, that old dependable dad who always said yes. But I wasn't that man anymore. The 12 years of silence had carved something into me, something colder, stronger, and less forgiving. I finished the whiskey and stared at the empty glass. Inside, the reflection of the moon trembled, and I could almost hear my late wife's voice. "Don't let bitterness turn you into them." I smiled a little. She always had a way of cutting through the noise. No, I wasn't bitter. I was clear, and clarity is sharper than anger ever could be. I went back inside, turned on the old lamp in the corner, and let its soft light fill the room. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was focus. On the table sat the old photo album I hadn't touched in years. I opened it. There she was, Lauren at 6, with a missing front tooth and sawdust in her hair. Lauren at 12, holding her school trophy with pride. And Lauren at 21, smiling in her graduation gown, her arm around me. That was the last picture we took together. I stared at it for a long time, feeling that familiar sting behind my eyes. Then I closed the album and exhaled. Tears don't fix what's broken. Action does. I walked to my study, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping for years. My insurance, my backup plan. Inside were names, numbers, and financial contacts. My lawyer, my accountant, and Frank Dobson, a retired investigator I'd met through a friend. Frank had once told me, "Sam, people think old age makes you slow, but it just gives you time to notice what everyone else misses." He was right. And that night I noticed everything. The way Ethan had avoided eye contact when I mentioned money. The way Lauren's voice trembled just before she smiled. The way they'd already called this place home. They thought they were manipulating an old man. They had no idea I'd already learned how to outthink the people who underestimated me. I sat back in my chair, listening to the rain start tapping on the windows. Every drop seemed to whisper the same thing. They took from you once. Don't let them do it again. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. I turned off the light, looked out over the dark water, and let one final thought settle deep inside me, the kind that doesn't fade when the night ends. I began to think, very carefully. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Sleep hadn't come easy, but clarity had. There's a quiet power in knowing you've been played, and deciding not to react right away. In my 72 years, I've learned that the smartest moves are made slowly, with a steady hand. When you rush, you reveal yourself. When you wait, you watch people reveal themselves. Lauren and Ethan had no idea that every word, every twitch, every nervous glance from yesterday had been quietly cataloged in my mind. I knew their type now. People who think charm can disguise motive. They'd spent over a decade pretending I didn't exist, and now, suddenly, I was their golden ticket. They thought they'd moved in on an old man too soft to say no. But that was the thing. They weren't moving in. They were walking straight into a lesson. I started my morning routine like any other day. Black coffee, newspaper, a few stretches for my bad hip. The difference was what sat beside the paper. A notepad and pen. On it, I wrote 3 words at the top. Protect, expose, rebuild. That would be my plan. 3 steps, no shortcuts. Step 1, protect. I called my financial advisor Greg, a sharp kid with a brain wired for numbers and a heart still untouched by greed. Greg, I said, I need to make sure my estate is airtight. He laughed at first. You worried about taxes, Sam? Not taxes, I said. People. I hadn't seen Ethan's face look that tense since their wedding day. The day he whispered in my ear that I'd done a decent job raising her. Decent. That word had haunted me for years. Now it was my turn to show him just how decent I could be. I called Frank Dobson, the retired investigator I trusted. Frank, I said, I need a favor. Quiet work. He chuckled on the other end. You catching a thief, Sam? I smiled. Something like that. By that evening, Frank was on the case. He still had connections in every corner of the state. Within a few days, he'd find out what my daughter and her husband had really been up to. Debts, lies, maybe worse. Step 3. Rebuild. Not my house or my fortune. Those were fine. I meant rebuilding the boundaries that had crumbled years ago. If Lauren wanted access to my life again, she'd have to earn it, brick by brick. And if she wanted to manipulate me, she'd find that every door was locked tight, and I held every key. A week later, the first report came in. Frank sent it in a sealed envelope. I opened it at the kitchen table, where the morning light hit the paper just right. What I read didn't surprise me. It confirmed what I already knew. They were drowning in debt, nearly $300,000 in unpaid loans, credit cards, and failed investments. Ethan's so-called consulting firm hadn't had a legitimate client in almost a year. They'd borrowed money from Nora's parents, claimed it was for a business expansion, but had spent most of it maintaining their image. They were living a lie built on borrowed time. And worse yet, the investigation uncovered something darker. They'd told relatives that I was losing my memory, that I wasn't fit to manage money anymore. They'd planted the story early, setting the stage to take control of my assets if I ever slipped. That cut deeper than anything, not because of the lie, but because of how prepared it was. They'd planned this long before showing up. I folded the papers carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and felt that slow, deliberate calm settle in my chest again. Little did they know, they weren't the only ones planning something. That evening, I invited them for dinner. Lauren's voice on the phone was cheerful, forced, but cheerful. We'd love to, Dad, she said. It'll be good to catch up. I could almost hear Ethan in the background coaching her on what to say. When they arrived, the table was already set. Steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal she'd loved as a kid. Her eyes softened for a brief second when she saw it, and for a flicker of time, I saw the little girl she used to be. But the moment passed when she spotted the stack of legal papers on the counter. What's that? She asked casually. Oh, I said, just some estate documents. I've been reviewing things lately. Her interest sharpened immediately. Ethan leaned slightly forward. Estate documents? I said, sipping my water. Figured I should start thinking ahead. Never know when it'll be time to put things in order. The tension in the room thickened like smoke. They thought they were in. They had no idea they were already being written out. After dinner, I walked them to the door, smiling the same quiet smile that used to calm her down as a child. "Good seeing you both," I said warmly. "Maybe next week we can talk about your plans," she offered quickly. "Oh, I have plans," I said, holding her gaze. "Big ones." The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. A week passed before I made my move. By then, Frank had finished his full report, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Fraudulent business filings, fake medical excuses, even a small investigation pending under Ethan's name. Every page I read stripped away another layer of illusion. They weren't victims of circumstance. They were architects of deceit. That Sunday morning, I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains, and looked out at the lake. The water was calm, like it always was before a storm. It was time. Lauren and Ethan arrived right on cue. They always did when they wanted something. She had that same too-sweet smile, and he had that same hand resting on her shoulder, like ownership disguised as affection. "Dad," she greeted brightly. "We brought breakfast. Thought we could spend the day together." Her tone was honey, but her eyes were knives. "Wonderful," I said, stepping aside. "Come in, let's sit." They followed me into the living room, where the sunlight hit the coffee table just right. The table where I'd laid out 2 manila folders. I gestured toward them. "Before we eat, I'd like to show you something." Lauren hesitated. "What's all this?" "Just a little research," I said. "Seems my curiosity got the better of me." I slid the first folder toward them. "Your financial records." Ethan's smile faltered. I don't think that's necessary." "Oh, I do," I said calmly. I opened it for them, 1 page at a time. Maxed out credit cards, 3 overdue loan payments, a second mortgage. And this, I tapped the paper gently. The letter from the bank about foreclosure proceedings. Lauren's jaw tightened. "You had no right." I cut her off with a raised hand. "I had every right the moment you showed up at my door demanding to move in. That was your mistake, Lauren. You assumed age meant weakness." Ethan shifted in his seat, his face draining of color. "This is private," he said quietly. "You went too far." "No," I said. "You did. When you told people I was senile, when you claimed I wasn't capable of managing my money anymore." The room went silent. Only the clock ticked. Lauren's voice came out small. "Dad, we didn't mean—" "Stop," I said sharply, my tone enough to freeze her mid-sentence. "Don't insult me with more lies. You planned this. Both of you. You wanted to take over my assets." I leaned back slowly, letting the tension hang in the air. "Now let's move on to the second folder." Ethan swallowed hard. "What's in that one?" "Police reports," I said, flipping it open. His face turned gray. I read aloud, "Filed by one Marcus Wheeler, your former business partner. He alleges embezzlement of $50,000 from company funds. Evidence submitted to the district attorney's office." Lauren gasped. "Ethan?" He shot her a glare. "It's not what it sounds like." I smiled thinly. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it sounds like. The DA's office is still deciding whether to press charges. But don't worry, Marcus reached out. Said he'd be willing to drop everything if restitution is made immediately." Her voice cracked. "You talked to him." "I did," I said, standing now. "He's a good man. Better than either of you gave him credit for. He thought maybe, just maybe, your newfound wealthy father could help pay it off." Lauren's lips trembled. "So that's what this is? You're just here to humiliate us?" I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "No, sweetheart. This isn't about humiliation. It's about consequence." Ethan's voice broke. "We're going to lose everything." "Yes," I said softly. "Everything you tried to steal from others. But maybe that's what it takes to remember who you were before greed took over." I walked to my desk and pulled out one last document, this one neatly folded in an envelope. "This," I said, setting it down, "is contact information for a bankruptcy attorney. He's the best in the state. I'll give you $25,000, half for him, half to begin paying back what you owe. But there are conditions." Lauren's eyes widened. Conditions. Yes, you enter therapy, real therapy, individually, not together. You make restitution to every person you've defrauded, and you get real jobs, honest work. No more schemes, no more pretending. You rebuild from the ground up. Ethan rubbed his temples. That'll take years. Maybe that's how long it'll take for you to remember what integrity feels like. He looked defeated, truly defeated. But Lauren, she looked broken. For the first time, her arrogance was gone. "Dad," she whispered, "I don't deserve your help." "No," I said quietly. "You don't, but you need it. And I need to know you can still become the person I once believed you were." She began to cry, silent and small. For a moment, I almost reached out. Almost. But mercy without lesson isn't love, it's surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. "You have one day to decide," I said finally. "If you accept, I'll call the attorney. If not, you'll face the charges Marcus is ready to file." The clock struck 3. The sound filled the room like a final verdict. They stood, speechless. Lauren reached for my hand, but I didn't move. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Go," I said softly. "Think. Choose wisely." They left without another word. The door closed behind them, and I stood there, the echo of silence washing through the house. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. And in that silence, I finally felt free. The next morning, the sun rose slower than usual. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the steam curl and fade, feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the quiet kind that comes from being alone, but the deep kind that comes from finally standing your ground. At exactly 8:47, the phone rang. Lauren's voice was soft, trembling, real. "Dad," she said, "we've thought about it. We'll do it, all of it. The therapy, the restitution, the jobs. We want to make this right." For a moment, I said nothing. I just listened to the sound of her breathing on the other end. Then I asked her one question. "If I hadn't won the money, Lauren, if I were still living in that small apartment, would you have ever called me?" The line went quiet. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "No, probably not." I was too ashamed. It hurt, but it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in over a decade. "Thank you," I said. "That's what I needed to hear." I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I was done letting the past poison what was left of my life. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's reclaiming your peace from people who never valued it. Before we hung up, I said, "This isn't a rescue, Lauren. This is your last chance. Prove to me that you can live with honesty. Show me that you've learned." Her voice cracked. "I will, Dad. I promise." After the call, I sat there for a long time. Outside, the lake shimmered with morning light. The house felt alive again, not because they'd come back, but because I'd finally reclaimed my place in it. 2 years later, they would rebuild their lives from scratch. And me? I'd wake up each morning knowing that wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in boundaries, in peace, and in knowing when to walk away. Yes, my daughter cut me off for 12 years, until she heard I was a millionaire. But in the end, the richest thing I ever gained was freedom. Would you have done the same if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of strength, dignity, and quiet revenge.